Good evening. While many reports tonight focus on the immediate return of open conflict to the Strait of Hormuz, the true strategic significance of these events is being widely overlooked. This is not merely a regional skirmish. Iran's calculated attacks on critical energy infrastructure represent a direct activation of a global energy strangulation strategy, a move with far-reaching implications beyond the Gulf itself. Looking back at May 4, 2026, it's clear this crisis did not erupt in a vacuum. It ascended, step by step, up a dangerous ladder of escalation. The genesis of this escalation lies with US Central Command, or CENTCOM, launching Operation Project Freedom, an initiative aimed at securing international maritime trade and breaking what it termed a de facto blockade in the region. Officials described Project Freedom as defensive in nature, focused in scope, and temporary in duration. According to a Reuters report from May 4th, American destroyers advanced toward the Strait of Hormuz, the jugular vein of global oil flow, under close cover from fighter jets and helicopters. This maneuver was a direct reflection of Washington's long-standing freedom of navigation doctrine. However, Tehran chose to interpret this as a direct assault on its sphere of influence and a clear violation of the existing ceasefire. This assertive deployment by US Central Command, explicitly aimed at securing international maritime trade, marks a departure from previous administrations' more cautious approaches to Iranian provocations in the Strait. It signals a clear shift towards a doctrine of immediate, kinetic response rather than prolonged diplomatic maneuvering, setting a new precedent for engagement. The first clear signal that tensions were about to turn kinetic came when the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy suddenly activated its coastal and ship radars, which had previously remained silent. According to open-source intelligence reports and leaked radio intercepts, Iranian forces began issuing repeated warnings to the American destroyers. These recordings, also confirmed by the Tasnim news agency, explicitly stated that any attempt to enter the strait would constitute a breach of the ceasefire and would be met with a military response. But when the United States fleet disregarded these radio announcements and continued on its planned course, Iran's military activated its infamous asymmetric naval tactics. Small, agile, low-radar signature fast boats belonging to the IRGC rapidly fanned out, not toward the main American warships, but directly toward the international commercial cargo ships attempting to transit the strait. The objective was not to directly engage the American Navy, but to paralyze the commercial traffic they were attempting to protect, thereby creating a wave of panic. The first victim of this tactical maneuver was the massive cargo ship, the HMM Namu, linked to South Korea. The vessel, sailing near United Arab Emirates waters, was harassed by Iranian boats and subsequently targeted by missiles. A violent explosion rocked the ship's engine room, and the black smoke billowing into the sky served as the first visual proof that the ceasefire had effectively collapsed. The attacks did not stop there. British-flagged cargo ships sailing north of Dubai were also placed in the crosshairs of these fast boats. According to an Al Jazeera report from May 4th and The Guardian's live coverage, the British government confirmed a fire broke out in one of its ship's engine rooms. Yet, its failure to mount any concrete military response exposed the operational weakness of some European powers in the region during moments of acute crisis. With commercial shipping being fired upon so recklessly, the United States military's rules of engagement were activated within seconds. This marked the true breaking point in the chronology of events. H-64 Apache and MH-60 Seahawk attack helicopters, launched from American destroyers, locked onto the Iranian boats maneuvering like hunters across the surface of the sea. Though these small boats could execute fast maneuvers, characteristic of asymmetric warfare, they stood zero chance against advanced thermal optics and air-to-surface precision munitions. As CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed, at least 6 Iranian fast boats harassing commercial ships were instantly destroyed by helicopter fire. Quote, "And then the small boats were all going against commercial ships, and all were sunk by Apaches and Seahawk helicopters." End quote. According to a CBS News report from May 4th, the boats sank within seconds. Meanwhile, United States President Trump claimed on his social media platform, Truth Social, that 7 boats had been sunk, adding, quote, "That's all they have left," end quote. According to Reuters, no damage was reported on any American assets, while this devastating tactical blow at sea immediately pushed Tehran into a far more aggressive and dangerous retaliation cycle. The swift and decisive neutralization of these asymmetric naval assets by advanced air power highlights a critical vulnerability in Iran's long-standing strategy. Historically, small boat swarms have posed a complex challenge, but this engagement demonstrates that modern thermal optics and precision munitions can render such tactics largely ineffective against a technologically superior adversary, altering the calculus of naval deterrence. Immediately after the loss of these fast boats, events leaped from sea level to land and sky. Iran's military activated its land-based launch ramps, seeking to compensate for its vulnerability at sea. According to an NPR report from May 4th, cruise missiles and kamikaze drones were fired in rapid succession from Isfahan, Bushehr, and the main southern naval base of Bandar Abbas. But this time, the target was not American warships in open water. Iran turned its missiles directly toward its neighbor, the United Arab Emirates. On the opposite shore of the Gulf, United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense Systems instantly detected these threats approaching their airspace. As sirens began to wail, air defense batteries engaged the incoming projectiles. According to a Gulf News report from May 4th, 3 of the 4 cruise missiles in the first wave were intercepted over United Arab Emirates territorial waters, while 1 fell harmlessly into the sea. But the attacks did not cease. They continued in 5 consecutive waves. It was during these swarm attacks that drones, managing to penetrate the air defense net, struck the civilian and industrial heart of the United Arab Emirates, the Fujairah industrial zone. According to the New York Post, a massive explosion was followed by a colossal fire at the facility. At least 3 Indian nationals were injured, and the black smoke covering the sky became the official image that the war had transformed from a controlled naval skirmish into regional infrastructure devastation. When we step back from the immediate military tempo and consider the place of that burning Fujairah facility within the global system, we begin to understand why this crisis is far from an ordinary regional conflict. The fire at Fujairah was not merely an oil terminal going up in flames. This was the global energy strangulation strategy being activated in practice. Iran's missiles did not hit a random target. Fujairah is the endpoint where the ADCOP, or Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, a vital lifeline for the United Arab Emirates, meets the sea. This pipeline allows the United Arab Emirates to deliver its oil directly to the safer Gulf of Oman, and from there to the Indian Ocean, without ever entering the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz that are susceptible to mining and blockade. According to a MEES report from May 4th, with a capacity to carry 1.5 million barrels of crude oil per day, expandable to 1.8 million in emergencies, this facility is an irreplaceable bypass route for Asian markets and the Western world, should the strait close or become unsafe. Iran's devastation of this facility with drones sends a blackmail message that is easy to read, but very hard to digest. Quote, "If we can't export our oil through Hormuz, your billion-dollar bypass routes aren't safe either." When this event is combined with the similar targeting of Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline to the Red Sea in April, according to Energy Newsbeat, its daily 700,000 barrel capacity was knocked out. It becomes clear that there is a systematic plan to destroy critical energy infrastructure. According to a BBC report from May 4th, the reverberations of these attacks on global markets were merciless and instant. The moment images of Fujairah port burning hit the news agencies, Brent crude oil's price per barrel made a sudden jump of 5 to 6%, surging from $114 to the $119 threshold. The disruption of oil loading operations created deep panic among investors. This immediate and sharp market reaction underscores the global economy's extreme sensitivity to disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz and its bypass routes. Unlike past regional conflicts, where price hikes were often speculative, this surge reflects a tangible and immediate threat to supply, indicating that the market perceives these attacks as a direct and sustained assault on the fundamental architecture of global energy distribution. If these facilities suffer permanent damage and bypass routes become inoperable, global inflation targets will be wiped out, and industrial giants and importing nations will be dragged into a severe cost bottleneck. This is a pressure felt on the back of the necks of not just the Gulf states, but all world economies, from Europe to Asia. But on the other side of the coin, a massive geopolitical rage and desire for retaliation is rapidly forming on the ground. The United Arab Emirates had generally pursued a policy of strategic patience against hundreds of ballistic missile and drone threats from Iran-backed proxies since February 28th, largely refraining from launching a direct counterattack. But the striking of Fujairah was the last drop that overflowed this cup of patience. The words attributed to the United Arab Emirates Defense Committee chairman to his Israeli counterpart, quote, "We cannot stay silent about these launches. We will retaliate," end quote, show that diplomatic language has given way to kinetic preparations. The heightened activity in the region is making this search for revenge tangible. The United Arab Emirates administration has put all its cards on the table against Iran's provocative move. Civil defense protocols across the country have been raised to their highest level. According to a DW report from May 5th, the ripple effect of the attacks crossed borders, with civilians being injured when a residential building in northern Oman took a hit, and Bahrain officially declaring a national emergency and suspending flights in its airspace. These events document that the crisis has turned the entire Gulf into a war zone. The Arabian Peninsula is, in a historically rare manner, in serious preparation for a reaction against this direct aggression on its own borders. The wound the United Arab Emirates has suffered is now too deep to be brushed off with mere diplomatic condemnations, and the demand for revenge is being voiced louder with every passing hour. When we place Iran's operational steps into the bigger picture, what emerges is not a regional hegemon testing its strength, but a trapped structure attempting to export its internal collapse outward. Understanding why the Tehran regime was so eager to break the ceasefire and directly strike a neighbor like the United Arab Emirates requires decoding the regime's underlying psychology. Prolonged sanctions, economic bottlenecks, water crises, and power struggles between different factions in domestic politics have accumulated a massive wave of civilian and elite discontent inside Iran. During the relatively calm weeks when the ceasefire was in effect, this internal pressure had begun to visibly shake the foundations of the regime. The most well-known survival reflex of dictatorships is to create an urgent, existential enemy abroad in order to suppress a potential mutiny or wave of uprising at home. This is precisely why they deliberately escalated the tension at sea, using the United States' Project Freedom operation as a pretext, and then fired their missiles, while simultaneously blaming their neighbors. The declaration of new maritime control lines by Iranian officials between Mubarak Mountain and the United Arab Emirates' al-Quwain coast is also part of this "Hormuz is under our control" propaganda, clearly aimed at the domestic audience. But on the ground, events did not unfold as they planned. Iran was hoping that Washington would become paralyzed by uncertainty, as in previous crises, and would avoid retaliation. Indeed, some reports from the Washington Post claimed that some Navy commanders were hesitant to confirm the attack and thereby force President Trump into action. But the reality on the ground wrote a very different story. The helicopters sinking the boats showed that the American military does not hesitate to use kinetic force when its red lines are crossed. Moreover, the Trump administration's complete shelving of nuclear negotiations and inclusion of names like Nick Stewart, who advocates aggressive solutions, into the team clarified a stark surrender or destruction message to Tehran. While Iran hoped to deter the United States, it instead trapped itself inside a far harsher military doctrine. An even more critical point is Iran making official statements through its channels that it has no plan to target the United Arab Emirates, even as missiles are falling on United Arab Emirates cities. Such inconsistencies indicate that the regime either does not have full control over its own military elements, or is too afraid to take responsibility for its actions on the diplomatic stage. Whichever scenario is true, this situation has cemented the perception among Gulf states that Iran is not a negotiable state, but rather a rogue threat source. Several scenarios may now be on the table for the coming hours and days. First scenario: the United Arab Emirates carries out a symbolic or direct retaliation, striking Iranian ports or oil facilities, and then waiting for the United States and Israel to move in. Second scenario: as CNN sources reported on May 4th, United States-Israeli strikes resume against targets inside Iran within the next 24 hours. This time, the targets may not be limited to military facilities. President Trump had previously listed civilian infrastructure, such as water treatment plants and power stations, as potential targets as well. Third and most critical scenario: the Arab coalition formally declares war on Iran. If this move, involving the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain under Saudi leadership, materializes, the geopolitical framework of the war changes completely. This would no longer be President Trump's war or Israel's war. It would become the war of Arab nations exercising legitimate self-defense. And from a strategic standpoint, the possibility of a ground operation may also be on the table. Kish Island, Iran's oil export center, and Keshem Island are critical points for Hormuz's control. The capture of these islands could completely neutralize the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' naval capacity. Iran's restarting of the war with these attacks has paradoxically united its enemies. The United States, Israel, and now the Arab states are on the same side, and Iran has neither a navy left to counter this coalition, nor air power, nor air defense. Tonight, May 4th, 2026, the ceasefire in Hormuz has been irrevocably shattered. Iran's actions have paradoxically forged a formidable alliance against it, uniting the United States, Israel, and now the Arab states. The singular variable determining the outcome of this renewed conflict will be Iran's ability to withstand a coordinated response, given its significantly diminished naval, air, and air defense capabilities against such a unified and determined front.